Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Hello, sir. Is it a health risk to continuous bulking and cutting year after year? Is there any data? Obviously, weight changes in moderation. Uh, Depends on what you're talking about as bulking and cutting. Are we talking about minor changes? Probably fine. Are you talking about what a lot of bodybuilders do in cutting down ultra lean? Yeah, that's a problem. I mean, realistically, if you're cutting down to 7% or 6% body fat on any sort of regular basis, that's a health risk. That's unhealthy, right? And that needs to be addressed. And people need to understand that. We talk about obesity being a health risk. Well, being 7% body fat is a health risk, right? That has a strain on your health and your longevity and fitness, just as much as bulking up to 25% body fat would, right? Neither one of those are healthy, right? Neither one of those are healthy. Your healthy range for a man is 10 to 20%. If you go too much below that or too much above that, you're going to hurt yourself in the long term. It's not good for your health. Now, as far as the continual bulking and cutting, I guess it depends upon how fat and how lean you get. And that's the point I would make with that. We're talking about guys who are bulking and doing 40-pound bulks. Yeah, that's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. And doing these cuts to where people cut down to 6 or 7% body fat for some bodybuilding show, that's not healthy. And you just have to have some common sense with that. But are we talking about people who do a little bit of clean bulking? Like, let's say, are we talking about 10-pound fluctuations or something? I don't think there's any reason to believe that something like that is compromising health in any way. In other words, let's say you spend a part of the year gaining 10 pounds of body weight doing a bulk, and then you trim it back off later to hopefully have gained a small amount of muscle mass, right? I think that's totally reasonable. And that's for people who are longer term lifters. For novice lifters and stuff, doing a 30-pound bulk in your first year is totally reasonable unless you are already obese, like you carry too much body fat. If you're reasonably lean and you do that, perfectly healthy. Again, it's a one-time deal. All right, next question. Thoughts on adding weight to each individual set instead of all sets across for someone who's having a lot of plateaus. For example, let's say on volume day, someone does 5x5 times 300. Next week, he does 1 times 5 times 305, and then 4 times 5 for 300. The week after, he does 2 sets of 5 with 305, and so on until he eventually gets to 5x5 with 305. Then he starts again at 1 times 5 at 310, blah, 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 and uses this form of slower but more sustainable progression. I'm going to be honest with you, brother. That's not going to be sustainable progression when you're an advanced lifter. All right, I'm going to call it like it is. If that was sustainable for an advanced lifter, you would add 5 pounds to all your big lifts every 5 weeks. Yeah, best of luck with that. Best of luck with that once you get really advanced. That actually would be extremely fast. But if you're able to do that, is that a reasonable form of progression? Yes, that's a good, reasonable form of linear progression. Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're probably going to have to do at a certain threshold with it is micro-loading, because 5-pound jumps like that, even on a single set, can eventually become a problem. They can become a problem. Micro-loading, microplates, things like that can be really useful with this form of slow progression. But the idea of what you're asking about is, can you increase on individual sets, even if you can't do all the sets? Yeah, absolutely. But you can also do the same thing on the last set. And here's what I'm going to point out with that. The last set's the one that's going to matter the most. In other words, I might tell you that you might be better off seeing if you can add on the last set. So if you're going to do 5x5, try to go for that extra rep or that extra weight on the very last set rather than the way that you're proposing it with the first set. And the reason is the last set is the one that has the most impact. You're the most fatigued, and usually you know that you've gained strength when you can add weight there, because you can almost always do more on your first set. Like if you can do 5 sets of 5 with a weight, you could absolutely probably be slightly stronger on the first set, but that's going to hurt you on the tail end of it usually if you're getting towards limit sets. A better judge of strength and a good way to progress, I think, is to focus more on the very last set, right? And I wouldn't do it as adding each individual set. When you get to the last set, when you can add, you keep working on that last set, and then you increase everything based upon that. Whether you can get more reps at the end, whether you can add 5 more pounds, that's what I usually recommend. All right, next question. Hey Jason, is the barbell hip thrust considered a hip hinge? If not, how effective does it work the hamstrings? Thank you. Well, look at the exercise. Yeah, it is a hip hinge. There is a hip hinge involved in a hip thrust. So to answer that first question, yeah, absolutely a hip hinge exercise. How much does it work the hamstrings? Well, EMG data would suggest pretty effectively. Now, would I like to see more independent data done? Yes, because Brett Contreras is our source of EMG data on the hip thrust, and he has his own personal bias towards the exercise. But if we use that as a starting point, you look at what the readings show, the hip thrust seems to be a pretty damn effective hamstring exercise, doesn't it? Right? Seems to be pretty effective hamstring exercise. And biomechanically, when you look at it, it does seem to be. So it's a hip hinge that does recruit the hamstrings as one of the primary movers, which means it's pretty good for that. All right, next question. Virgin Gaines said in a live stream he would eventually make a worse of the fitness industry on you. Also said he thinks he could get a 405 bench by the end of this year. Thoughts? 405 bench, I don't know about that. He's going to need some gear to do that. He's going to need to blast some gear. A lot of people think he's been using gear already. I haven't looked lately to see, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. As far as all that goes, look, his only complaint against me is going to be the fact that I don't like veganism. That I don't like veganism. I think it's ridiculous. I don't think the science backs it. But even I have said that, you know what, if you personally have an ethical belief against eating animals, if you have a personal major ethical problem with it, now that is your personal ethics, then by all means, you probably should be vegan. Not for me. It's not for me. It's not for most of us. But if that is really and truly how you feel, then you probably do need to be a vegan, right? Why would you compromise your own morals? So as far as his stance goes with all of that, he might make the video, but let's be realistic here. Against most of the people who he targets, I'm probably going to be pretty far down the list. I don't do the fake natty thing. Don't claim natty. I don't pimp supplements or any of that. But do I promote eating animal products? Yes. Do I promote ethical ranching, at least what I consider ethical? Yes, I do. I do believe in hunting. I do believe in ranching. Now, I'd like to see a lot of the factory farming be changed, right? I do think we need better ethics as far as animal husbandry goes and all of that. But no, I'm not going to promote veganism. And so if that's his problem with me, then so be it. But as far as all the other issues he has, there's plenty of other people I'm sure higher on the radar, right? Because there's certainly people who promote eating a hell of a lot more animal products than I promote, and all the supplements and the stuff that he knows is BS and everything else. And at the end of the day, Richard needs to remember, he's followed me for years. He's taken my advice, used my advice. He knows I've helped him. So he knows my advice has helped his progress. So if that makes me worse in the fitness industry, then that's pretty laughable, especially considering all the other nonsense that's out there. But, you know, he's free to make the video. I'll make money and publicity off of it. It will line my pockets. So I hope he does. All right, next question. Hey, coach, what's your opinion on adding some back offsets to accumulate volume but sticking to the same rep range, i.e. doing 3x5, then drop weight by 10% and do 2 to 3 times 5 to 6? I know you're not a fan of mixed rep ranges in a single session, and I imagine you prefer to see a 5x5 rather than this, but as a method, is it viable and worthy of a Blaha thumbs up? No, it's not worthy of a Blaha thumbs up. How is this any different from mixing rep ranges? In fact, it's inferior to mixing rep ranges. If you're going to drop the weight 10%, you need to add reps. Like, why in the world would you think that dropping the weight 10% and doing the same reps is going to add muscle? Every study we have shows that if you rest short enough that you are required to reduce the weight to get the same reps on subsequent sets, it produces less muscle growth and longer breaks. If you want more volume, you need to take longer breaks and lift the same weight. If you do back off sets, because this is what you're doing, you're just doing lighter weight. Really, you need to be doing more reps if you're going to drop the weight. You're going to need longer time between training sessions. But realistically, I'm just going to tell you, if you feel that you need more volume there, you need to take longer breaks and go ahead and try to replicate the same work sets with your limit sets. Otherwise, you're doing what I call junk volume at this point. You are adding volume that's going to impede your recovery with minimal adaptative stress from it. This falls into the category of what I would call junk volume. You're probably not doing yourself any real favors. You really aren't. It's not a good way to program, in my opinion. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.